Welcome to Business Stories. I'm your host, Jeremy Arnon. Today's special guest from ENIAC Ventures, partner Nihal Mehta. Hey, Nihal, how are you? Thanks for joining.
Good. I'm great. Thanks for having me. That was a funny picture of me because that was like pre-COVID. This is post-COVID beard.
This is 6 months later, no LinkedIn update.
Right. Exactly.
Cool. Well, thanks for being our second guest on Business Stories. If you don't know about the show yet, or for anyone watching, a couple quick housekeeping things. This is a show about we want to get to know our guests as people. It's business stories where there's no BS. So we're going to have deep conversation with Nihal, trying to understand why he does what he does, and really dig in, dive in, trying to get to know him a little bit more. So Nihal, would love to learn a little bit more about you. For those who don't know, Nihal has been a fixture in the New York tech scene for the last 20 years, first as an entrepreneur, now as one of the most successful seed investors. So Nihal, can you just give a little background for people who don't know who you are?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. I started building startups over 20 years ago. Actually, my very first startup was in my college dorm room in Philadelphia in 1998. And since then, built 5 startups. A bunch of them were spectacular failures. So I say definitely have accumulated my share of scar tissue and muscle memory. Interestingly enough, my 3 partners at ENIAC have also had very similar experiences founding and operating startups, some failures, some successes, and of course, learned the most from our failures, but started investing off of our successes. And after a few wins, started angel investing about 15 years ago. My very first investment, company you know well, first check into a company called AdMob, which was acquired by Google a few years later. That's when I was really inspired by the venture capital experience. That company was backed by Excel and Sequoia, who in particular have become mentors to us and ways that we look to build our firm. And then we kind of formalized our investment strategy and created the firm ENIAC about 10 years ago. We're now investing out of ENIAC 4. So it's our 4th fund. We've done probably about 200 investments through the 4 funds and personally. And it's been amazing to do what you love with people who you love and get inspired every day by incredible founders that are trying to change the world.
So let me ask you a question about starting it, because you started it with 3 friends, and I find it fascinating that you were able to convince 3 friends to do anything. But walk me through. Was it one person's idea, and they had to convince the others, or were you guys talking about this for years, and it was just the right time? Like, how did that go down?
Yeah, it was interesting. We've all, first and foremost, we were friends, right? We met freshman year and sophomore year in college, so 25 years ago. And the first decade of our careers, we were building startups. And actually, it's actually a really funny ENIAC story because I invited myself in. Vic, Hadley, and Tim were already, set on starting a fund, and I had just sold a startup, my first success, my first win, a company called IPSH, which was a mobile marketing platform, to Omnicom in 2005. And I remember Vic and Hadley reached out and said, "Hey, we're thinking about raising money for this fund." And so I responded, "We're still looking for this email, but this is how the fable goes, at least across the firm." I responded and said, "I'm in." And Vic and Hadley and Tim were like, "He said he's in. Does that mean he wants to invest, or does he, what does he mean?"
Because you guys were doing it kind of on the side for a little while, right?
That's right. Yeah. and so there was like, doubt as to what Nihal meant when he said I'm in. And then they're like, what do you mean? Like, how much are you investing? And I said, no, I want to be a partner. And so I forced myself into the partnership. But yeah, we founded, Fund One together. It was a small fund. It was, mostly our money and some friends. $1.5 million. We didn't take management fees because we were still running our own startups at that time. But we treated it like a real fund. So we're working on nights and weekends. We had 32 slugs. We were debating, you know, days and weeks over a 25K investment 10 years ago, the same amount of time today that we make over a $1.5 million investment, so we took it very seriously. And from there, we grew. Fund Two, we started inviting family office, high net worth individuals. Fund Three was our first institutional fund. So that was backed by a university endowment. And then kind of off into the races. But the vision was that we would eventually peel off our startups after exiting and do this full time. And so Fund One was the experiment. And, after that, we were all in.
Yeah. And you've had some great success so far. I mean, a lot of deals have moved to acquisition, but you've got some big ones in there. Like you guys were the seed investor in Boxed, which is an amazing e-commerce company. Just recently, I read about your investment in Attentive Mobile. And for those who don't know, you guys were the seed investor, I believe, in Attentive 4 years ago. Attentive just raised a $230 million Series D round, just announced, I think, 2 weeks ago. And I read Hadley's blog post, your partner, and I loved the honesty. You guys basically said, we could tell you that, we did an analysis and that there was this aligned with our thesis. And but what it really came down to was you guys knew the founders, you loved the founders, and you hopped on board. And we talk about the importance of team and the, trusting your instincts. And I thought it was great that you guys were honest about it. Tell me more about that.
I mean, one thing we've learned as founders ourselves is it's all about the team. It's all about the grit and the resilience and the execution of the founding team. In the case of Attentive, we were very lucky because we had backed Brian Long and AJ in their previous startup, a company called Tap Commerce. Actually, that was one of our first investments in ENIAC One. Brian was actually an EIR, and so as he was leaving the previous startup, we were jamming on ideas. We were lucky to be in a seed. That company was Tap Commerce. So it was bought by Twitter. After he left Twitter, he was starting something new, and he wanted to work with the same folks again. So we were lucky to be along for that ride. And yeah, 4 years later, the company is now valued at over $2 billion, and it's still going. I mean, it's still very early in the life cycle of that company, so we're very excited. But that, double clicking on that, it's about the team, but it's also about something about serial founders, right? I mentioned I have my share of scar tissue and muscle memory. We really look for that. It doesn't have to even be a win in the previous startup, right? It just has to be an experience. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes it's a failure or it's a small win. So the next time you're doing something, ideally with the same people, so you've de-risked this kind of founder chemistry, and you can optimize for that, right? The second we say, when founders have their hands around each other's necks in a previous experience and they want to work with each other again, that means the world, right? And so that's the kind of pattern matching that we saw, that we see a lot, and obviously Tap Commerce and Attentive are examples of that. We have a number of other examples of that in our portfolio. That's also one of the advantages of being in venture for so long, is that's our NPS score. If you do a good job, founders will come back, right? And they'll refer other amazing founders.
So So I guess it kind of reminds me of the sort of 10,000 hours to become an expert. It's the sort of notion of they failed a couple times. They've probably gotten their scars already. Let's jump in. And also, I think, I mean, you've been very honest about, not everything that you've done has been a success. Uh, I think the people that were with you when you were down, I think that you show a lot of loyalty to. And how does that play in to your thinking as well?
That's right. I mean, as a seed investor too, it's very unique. It's a unique time for us to really work with founders because that's one of the hardest times to get a company off the ground. You know, you we are in the trenches literally with our founders. Whether it's getting their first customers, getting their first partnerships, talking them off ledges. I mean, we joke, but it's true. We are more of a therapist than a than a capitalist, right? Um, and founders never forget that. I mean, we remember as founders too, the folks that are with you, on the phone with you, in person, talking you off ledges, helping you close your first deals. I'll still remember as a founder, maybe not, less than a dozen moments that I've had with investors when times were tough. I'll remember every word in those phone calls or those meetings, those words of encouragement, that enabled me to keep on going, right? Or dramatically accelerated the trajectory of my business. So that, that's our role. That's what we try to be for our founders. And I think that engagement at that early stage is never forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully all the way to the IPO, right? Or the multi-billion-dollar exit, right? Because those days are really are the hard days, and those moments are the most impactful.
Yeah. Cool. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about some diversity initiatives. I see your T-shirt there. Your wife is a very successful person in the New York tech scene as well, and Girls Who Code. I believe she was the founder, correct?
That's right.
So I know you've had a long history of social justice causes. You're starting something new that's going to be announced soon. Can you tell us a little bit about the latest cause that you're passionate about?
Sure. I think high level, we're very fortunate to to be active kind of in the community and to respond to causes in a digital way. And obviously, my wife is the paramount example of that, having seen so many classrooms and computer labs that were just full of boys, and knew that something needed to be fixed and changed. And so that was the inspiration for Girls Who Code, and now teaching over 200,000 girls in all 50 states. And on a much smaller scale, we've been doing these kind of digital web projects, I would say, just on the side, just to maybe focus our efforts in certain areas. So in the beginning of the pandemic, for example, we launched a site called Help Main Street, helpmainstreet.com, to provide essentially a way for all the small businesses, many of which are out of business now, unfortunately, specifically restaurants, try to get a direct cash infusion, from their customers. And we started just by aggregating gift cards, for example, which is like the best no interest loan. And there was actually no aggregator of gift cards online, so we created one. And you can go to helpmainstreet.com. We have over 120,000 restaurants across the country there. And you can give directly to the owners of those businesses. So that was something we did at the beginning of the pandemic. And then obviously the events of George Floyd and the recent BLM, Black Lives Matter movement, we recognized in tech and venture capital in particular, there are a lot of pledges and words and that were created, by various stakeholders in the industry, and we wanted to make sure that there was real kind of accountability behind those pledges. And we also wanted to make it very easy for people to create pledges. And I think, one of the ways many people are looking to solve some of the systemic racism that we have in this country is around greater economic empowerment, of the Black community. And, on one side, you have somebody like Michael Jordan that pledged, $100 million over 10 years, right? Which is like epic. But there's a lot of mid and long tail pledges that are created as well, and they live on Medium or somebody's website, or somebody just tweeted it out. And so we're launching next week. So in mid-October, our solution here, which is called the 100K Pledge. And it's at the100kpledge.com. And we're actually aggregating all of these existing pledges that are public. And we're also creating a very easy and simple interface for anybody to pledge, to donate, hire, or invest in the Black community. And the pledge amount is minimum $100,000 over 10 years. So it can be one hire, it can be one investment. It can be a series of donations. And after you create a pledge, it lives on the website, for 10 years. We're going to track your progress. One of my co-founders, VJ, who is also a college roommate, calls it like a Fitbit for social justice, in the sense that, it tracks the pledge and keeps everybody accountable.
That's great. So I like the fact that it's not just money. It's also hiring. It's also, education, and in that accountability you mentioned. So do you think 10 years is too long a time frame? Why did you guys pick 10 years?
I think it feels like one or 2 or 3 years is a little short in terms of a window. It's also such a important issue that if you look back in our lives, right? Rodney King, Trayvon Martin, and what seems to happen is like there's these little blips, like there's a reaction to these horrific events, but then kind of, especially in today's ADD media culture, we just kind of forget about it, and hey, today Donald Trump has COVID, and all the news cycles kind of divert towards, the topic of the day. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to make sure the time horizon was long enough where we could really see these pledges through. And 10 years felt like the right time. Interestingly enough, a lot of the other pledges are also around the concept of a decade. We didn't collaborate with Michael Jordan on his 100 million 10-year pledge, but he picked 10 years as well. So it feels right, and again, this is just a starting point. So we hope that we can continue to iterate on it.
That's great. Have you guys with ENIAC, have you started to or you guys have probably been thinking it this way for a long time, but have you started to kind of shift some of the industries that you're looking at, or some of the different ways that you're sort of doing deal flow to try to, level the playing field a little bit more?
Yeah. So actually, right after George Floyd, we opened up essentially office hours to Black founders. We've done 100 so far as a firm. I do almost 10 a week, since May. One thing that we realized, and by the way, that's to meet as many and help as many Black founders as possible, with the ultimate goal of obviously creating new investment opportunities, not only for ENIAC, but for many other firms. And one thing that we've learned is that many of these businesses are extraordinarily early, right? Genesis, even before pre-seed. But one of the things that we learned is that these networks of specifically knowledge, capital, are completely siloed. They're not democratized, right? In all different types of communities. And part of our role is kind of flattening that, right? So we can give access to the CEO of MasterCard to anybody who wants to talk to him, right? And like, we're kind of the connector in that relationship. that's one of the things that I noticed, even as a founder myself. You know, your networks are very specific to your experience, and if you can meet somebody that's willing to just unlock other networks, that can be very advantageous to your business. You know, that can be game changing. And so what we try to do on these sessions is, a few extraordinarily high value introductions, and they can be introductions to investors if they're ready, but also investors to maybe other founders that have shared similar experiences, similar challenges, and maybe how they've overcome those challenges. Introductions to potential customers, to partners, to co-founders. So there's a number of ways that we think we can add value. And we've been trying to do that now for since late May, and we hope we can keep it up. But yeah, it's been going well. We've been putting a lot of energy towards it.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the announcement and the launch and seeing who's involved. I wish we could talk all day. People do have a short attention span, so I try to keep these to about 20 minutes. So you've made it to the speed round.
Uh-oh.
Speed round is our final question and answer, where I'm going to give you a couple words, and I just want to hear your first thoughts that come to mind. So,
Okay.
So I'm going to say a word. Just give me whatever pops into your head.
Okay.
Elon Musk.
Bulldog.
Industry you're most excited about now.
I think in general, applied machine learning.
Applied machine learning. That's a little bit of a buzzword still, but I think it's we're starting to see some successes in the space, so it's becoming less buzzy. So, are you guys seeing a lot of startups in that space?
Yeah, I think almost every investment that we've made recently has some machine learning in it, but we feel like that's the most tangible part of artificial intelligence, that can be applied horizontally to any industry, right? Specifically industries that are kind of staid and massive, things like healthcare and insurance and construction and fintech. So we think there's quite a bit of opportunity in those areas.
So you were an early mobile guy. So what was your first cell phone? What model was your first cell phone? You even remember?
I have everything. I had the Zach Morris, big Nokia. I have it downstairs actually in my apartment. But I still kept all my phones. I think probably my favorite one was a hot pink Motorola Razr.
Hot pink, nice.
Yeah, I got teased for it, but I gotta tell you, it was one of my favorites.
Conversation starter. I had I think I had the StarTAC, Motorola StarTAC, a little flip thing. I liked it.
Yep.
Last one, binge watching suggestion. Anything that you're watching that the shows that you recommend?
Yeah, I just got into, just inspired from people talking about it on Twitter recently, Ted Lasso. It's a nice show to just take your mind off all the crazy news in today's world. It's a comedy. It's about a soccer coach from Kansas that goes to the UK, and it's a cultural comedy, but it's also it's a really well developed plot. I've just watched a few episodes, and it's pretty good. Jason Sudeikis is pretty hilarious. So
if it's an SNL alumni, then it's got to be worth the watch.
Exactly.
Well, cool. Thanks so much, Nihal, for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it's always great to catch up, especially during the pandemic. So, Thanks so much for coming on. And for anyone watching, we've got a ton of great guests coming up in the future. So I'll be announcing those over the next couple of weeks. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me, Jordan.